Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, friends and enemies. My name is Jānis Rinkulis VIII, and today the time has finally come for us to compose the first complete musical work on this channel. We have reached part 2 of Schoenbergs' Fundamentals of Musical Composition, where we will begin exploring different musical forms, composing a piece in each of them along the way. As always, if you enjoyed the content on this channel, feel free to join our community of composers and musicians on my Discord server, where we have friendly gatherings, discussions and composing sessions. And as always, thank you to my Patreon subscribers. Before diving into today's main chapter in the Small Ternary Form, I would like to briefly go through a few useful ideas Schoenberg discusses in his chapters on accompaniment, character and mood, as well as self-criticism. The accompaniment should not be a mere addition, it should be as functional as possible, and at best should act as a complement to the essentials of its subject, the tonality, rhythm, phrasing, contour, character and mood. It should reveal the inherent harmony of the theme and establishes a unifying modus. It should satisfy the necessities and exploits the resources of the instrument or group of instruments. Accompaniment becomes imperative if the harmony or rhythm is complicated. In descriptive music, the accompaniment contributes much to the expressive sonority. Any harmonically self-sufficient melodic segment may remain unaccompanied, supplying contrast and transparency, which may contribute to the character of the piece. Transparency is a merit in itself, moreover, pauses never sound bad. As a unifying device, the accompaniment must be organized in a manner similar to the organization of a theme, by utilization of a motif, the motif of accompaniment. The motif of accompaniment can seldom be worked out with as much variety and development as that of a melody. Its treatment consists rather of simple rhythmic repetition and adaptation to the harmony. Its special form must be so constituted that it can be modified, liquidated or abandoned, as the nature of the theme demands. Types of accompaniment. Choral-like. This kind of accompaniment is rather seldom used in instrumental music. One finds it more often in homophonic choral music, in which all the voices sing the same rhythm according to the text, as in the Pilgrim's chorus of Wagner's Tannhäuser. The requirements of piano style are better fulfilled through the use of broken chords, although the voice leading remains essentially choral-like. Compare example 63A with example 63B. In general, the accompaniment makes use of shorter notes than the melody. However, the contrary also occurs. The concept that music expresses something is generally accepted. However, chess does not tell stories, mathematics does not evoke emotions. Similarly, from the viewpoint of pure aesthetics, music does not express the extra-musical. But from the viewpoint of psychology, our capacity for mental and emotional associations is as unlimited as our capacity for repudiating them is limited. Conversely, music can evoke associations with extra-musical objects. Many composers have composed under the urge to express emotional associations. There also exists a great variety of characteristic pieces expressing every conceivable mood. All these categories are intended to produce not only musical impressions but also to provoke secondary effects, associations of a definite character. Listen, play or read harmony and the melody separately several times. This sometimes prevents self-deception. Perhaps only one of these factors is poor. If the harmonic progression is satisfactory, the beginner may easily overlook shortcomings in his melody. A good melody should be smooth, fluent and balanced when it's played without accompaniment. Analyze. Be conscious of the significant features of the basic motif and determine whether they or the less characteristic are developed. There may be empty segments with no real content, without significant melodic or rhythmic movement, even without harmonic change. Eliminate non-essential. Too much variation, too much embellishment and figuration, excessively remote motif forms, too abrupt a change of register may contribute to imbalance. Avoid monotony. Too many repetitions of tones or melodic figures are annoying, if they do not exploit the advantage of repetition emphasis. Watch especially the highest tone of melody. The climax normally appears towards the end, and can be repeated or exceeded only with caution. Avoid moving too long in one direction. Evaluate sensitively the endings of the phrases. Watch the bass line. The bass was previously described as a second melody. This means that it is subject to somewhat the same requirements as the principal melody. It should be rhythmically balanced, should avoid the monotony of unnecessary repetitions, should have some variety of contour, and should make full use of inversions, especially of seventh chords. Make many sketches. Change the method of variation frequently. Try each method several times, join the best sketches to produce others, and improve them until the result is satisfactory. To make sketches is a humble and unpretentious approach toward perfection. Watch the harmony, watch the root progression, and watch the bass line. An overwhelming proportion of musical forms is structurally composed in three parts. The third part is sometimes a true repetition, recapitulation of the first, but oftener it is more or less modified repetition. The second part is organized as a contrast. This form may derive from the early rondo, in which interludes were inserted between repetitions and a refrain. Repetition satisfies the desires to hear again what was pleasing at the first hearing, and simultaneously aids comprehension. A contrast, however, is useful to avoid the possibility of monotony. Sections producing contrast of various types and degrees are to be found in a great many forms, example small ternary form, larger ternary forms such as minuet or scherzo, and sonata or symphony. Contrast presupposes coherence. Incoherent contrast, though tolerated in descriptive music, is intolerable in a well-organized form. Contrasting sections, therefore, must utilize the same processes by which motif forms are connected in simpler formulations. The A section of the A-B-A1 form may be a sentence or a period ending on tonic dominant or third. The beginning at least should clearly express the tonality, because of the contrast to follow. The A section establishes a tonic, the B section contraposes another region. This provides both contrast and coherence. Further contrast can be achieved through the use of new variations of the basic motif or changing the order of previous motif forms. The A1 section, the recapitulation, ends on the tonic if it completes an independent piece. It is seldom an unchanged repetition. The final cadence generally differs from that of the first section, even if both lead to the same degree. The most effective factor is a contrasting section in the harmony. The time has come to put the knowledge we have gained from Schoenberg's fundamentals of musical composition into practice. I will show you what I used and how I used it in my first officially completed composition, written for English horn with piano accompaniment. Despite Schoenberg's recommendation that the listener should immediately understand the key at the beginning of a piece, I allowed myself to wander around in a somewhat atonal impressionistic manner, introducing a clear tonality only in the middle section of the piece for contrast. My harmony teacher would probably kill me, because in the very first two measures I decided to throw in 3 parallel fifths. The first two measures serve as an introduction to the A section, a small rubato element with parallel fifths in the accompaniment. Measures 2 through 6 form the first 4-measure sentence. In measure 3, we hear the first phrase built from 2 triplet motifs followed by a pause that marks the end of the phrase. The phrase is repeated in measure 4 to establish it firmly in the listener's mind. In measure 5, the development begins. After the first triplet comes a long note immediately followed by another triplet at the end of the measure, creating a connection between measure 5 and 6, forming a 2-measure phrase. In measure 6, the rhythm settles down. The triplet motif disappears and a cadence is formed, bringing the first sentence to a close. Now let us look at the texture. For the piano's left hand, I chose an arpeggiated texture that provides the harmonic context for the melody. To connect measures 5 and 6, I played with the direction of the arpeggios. The piano's right hand serves as a counter melody so that the following 8-note motion does not stop during the melody's longer notes. In measure 5 and 6, to ensure that development occurs not only in the melody but also in the accompaniment, I took a motif from the counter melody, turned it upside down, and used it at twice the frequency. In the cadence of measure 6, I added 2 half notes and a downward motion in the texture to signal the end of the first sentence. I connected the first sentence to the next with this B-flat pickup note, which launches the second sentence in measure 7. The first 2 measures of the second sentence are practically identical to the first one, but this time the melody is played by the piano's right hand, while the English horn performs the counter melody. This provides enough variation to keep the listener from falling asleep due to monotony, while avoiding excessive variation that might become confusing. I also varied the note values in the English horn counter melody. Where there were 8 notes before, here we find quintuplets and 16th notes. From measure 9 onward, the melody returns to the English horn during its developmental phase and with a crescendo reaches the first climax in the high G. Here I also tried to influence the sense of form through the direction of the arpeggios. This drives the accompaniment downward while the melody ascends, creating a sense of breadth through the expanded range of texture and the increased distance between melody and bass. In measure 12, to prevent the rhythm from feeling too uniform after the climax, I arranged the accompaniment in the offbeat. I concluded this sentence with a piano reference to the ending of the Andante from Beethoven's 4th cello sonata first movement. And here begins the B section. It also consists of 2 sentences, though this time they're twice as long. The first phrase lasts 2 measures. It contains references and elements from the A section, such as the triplet figure and the rhythmic pause in a half note, but it also introduces a new dotted motif. To create contrast with the A section, I establish a relatively stable tonality here, a clear and bright B major, taking us from an impressionistic atmosphere to a more romantic one. In the following 2 measures, I repeat the first phrase but adapt its second half to a new harmony. Beginning with measure 19, I developed this phrase over 4 measures, fragmenting it through more frequent repetitions of the dotted rhythm. This is followed in measure 22 by a brief rhythmic pause and a cadence. Similar processes occur in the accompaniment as in the A section. There is a chordal element in the lower register outlining the harmony, combined with counter-melodic material in the upper register. Using the principle of equivalence, I construct the second sentence from measure 23 in a similar way, but this time moving toward the climax and sustaining the bright E-flat major harmony for 6 measures. Everything ends with a ritenuto and a pause in B-flat. And it is precisely this B-flat that begins the repetition of the opening introduction, after which the A1 section starts. The first sentence of the A1 section is almost identical to the beginning of the piece, with only minor textural changes in the counter-melodies to introduce at least a little variation. In the second sentence, however, I begin a much longer developmental passage involving modulations, rhythms, fragmentation, offbeat accompaniment figures, and an expansion of the texture in both directions leading to the final climax. The climax lasts 2 measures. Here I marked a slight accelerando. The English horn retains the same melody heard in the first 2 measures of the first sentence, only now played forte. The feeling of climax comes primarily from the texture in the piano's left hand, where bell-like quarter notes replace the arpeggios, while the right hand plays quintuplets in the upper register. Measure 45 contains a crescendo, followed in measure 46 by sudden subito piano, a pause, and the final resolution in C major. First of all, many thanks to English horn player Gundige Anna Wilsone and pianist Veronika Rinkulis for the recording, as well as to sound engineer Edvins Ivanovs. Now that the piece has been recorded, heard in the real life, and thoroughly processed by my brain, I can say that in the future I should pay more attention to Schoenberg's fourth point of self-criticism: avoid monotony. As my first complete musical composition, the piece turned out quite well, but it could definitely benefit from more variation, especially in the A1 section. The variations and changes are there, of course, but in practice during an actual performance, they are not always as noticeable or audible as expected. I'm fairly certain that in the future I will revisit this composition and experiment further with the second half of the B section and the A1 section. Anyway, thank you for watching this video, and of course, subscribe immediately to this channel, my Patreon, my Discord, and see you not sooner than next time.